Tim Shorts, and Tim is one of my favorites on Ancient Aliens and the Unexplained. So every time I turn on the TV, there's Tim's smiling face. But he has a lot of books out. His most recent book is Weird Time, if you can see this. And his other books he had was Mimics, if you can see that, and Alien Artifacts, and a whole slew of others. I could be here all day just showing his books. But this one is just fantastic. I mean, if you want to know anything about time travel, time distortions, the Philadelphia experiment, I mean, it's all in here. So this is a great book. Tim, you want to talk about this book that you got out?
Well, yeah, Paul. Thank you for that very nice introduction. And I just may add that all three of the books that you just showed everyone there, you're a contributing writer as well. So these books would not be the books that they are if it wasn't for fantastic writers like yourself.
Oh, thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I always appreciate, the time and effort that, people like you, Paul, go into to research your pieces and get them put together and set in. And I mean, I can always tell that, you've worked really hard for your chapters. And like I said, these books would not be the books that they are without the help of people like yourself.
And you have a lot of contributors for this book.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, we've got people like Sean Castile. He's my co-writer. He does like all the proofreading, and he's just just an absolute fantastic. When it comes to correcting spelling and grammar mistakes, and as well as his own fantastic chapters. Scott Corrales, Nigel Watson, Diane Tessman. The list just goes on, and all of us, we all used to work with the late great Timothy Green Beckley,
Oh,
who
yeah.
I mean that's really how I met all of you was through Mr. Beckley. And so, I mean, after he passed away, I wanted to continue putting out books uh, in a similar vein to what Tim Beckley was doing. And one of his favorite things was to get a bunch of writers, like all of us, a gang of idiots, together to contribute chapters to his books. And that was always really a popular format. I mean, his audience really enjoyed those types of books, and I enjoyed writing for him and putting them together, and I just wanted to keep that going. After he passed away, and I'm sure people like yourself, wanted to do the same thing.
Oh, absolutely. And it was funny how I met you because I was friends with the legendary late Brad Steiger.
Mhm.
Brad Steiger introduced me to Timothy Green, another legend. And then Timothy introduced me to you, another legend. So we have all these legendary stories that are out there from Brad Steiger, Timothy Green Beckley, and from you, Timothy Short. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, well, and that it's unfortunate that Brad Steiger happened to pass away a few years before Tim Beckley did, because if he was still alive, I'm sure that he would have wanted to contribute to these books as well. And in fact, and you have to correct me, I don't know if it was Alien Artifacts, but one of the early books that we put together after Tim Beckley died, I actually used a piece by Brad Steiger that he had written, I think, for another book that Tim Beckley did, but it didn't get included, and I still had it in my files, and it fit. Uh, Whatever the category is, I can't remember now which book it was. It fit the category, so I had to use it.
um, and it's just so fantastic because I get people that come up to me, and as a paranormal investigator, they say, "Where did you gain your knowledge from? Did you gain it from so and so from these TV shows?" I said, "No, come on. I got it from Brad Steiger. When I was a little boy, I was reading his books, and then my articles wind up in his books. So, I mean, it was just a great turnaround. And then meeting you two, Timothy Beckley and you, I mean, that really helped my skills as a paranormal investigator.
Oh well, it was the same way with me. I mean, I grew up reading Brad Steiger's books. It used to be, and I'm sure you remember this. You could go to the drugstore and buy paperback books that were nonfiction and written by people like Brad Steiger and John Keel. And that was my first introduction to a lot of these different things. And of course, Steiger and Keel pretty early on were taking a different look at, say, like UFOs and paranormal phenomena rather than the standard that had been developed, really since the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. And so Steiger and Keel were just kind of exploring and looking at new ideas, and I found that fascinating, and it really set me off in a completely different direction, I think, than a lot of maybe earlier researchers who were still, very hung up on, these old 20th century ideals. So, people like that, really were a big influence on me. And, it was thanks to, this, I hate to say it, but the, cheapy paperback books that you could buy for 50 cents. At the drugstore. Can't find books at that price anymore.
No, no. And so many of your books are online. So it's just really fantastic because you can just sit there, look at your smartphone on the light rail, and read one of your books. So that's just really great.
Well, I do. I love, like regular physical books. I mean, it's just you should see my library of physical books. It's pretty extensive, but there is something to be said with ebooks and digital copies of books that to be able to get that instant gratification. If you're interested in a book and you find it, and then you can download it into your tablet or phone and read it right then and there. I love that. And so I wanted all of our books to have that capability as well. Not only can you buy it as a physical book, but you can also download it and read it. I mean, I'm not going to be one of these types of people who are just like, no, it's got to be a physical book and nothing at all. No, I mean, I want to bring everybody in who is interested in our writings, and if the only way really that they're going to read a book is downloading it to their phone or tablet, then I'm going to make that possible for them.
Fantastic. Hey, I have Phil and Zandine back there. I know they have some things they want to ask you. So, Phil, you want to take it away?
I want to welcome Zandine to the podcast. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. And I'm on board with Tim about the real books. There's nothing like turning a page. I hate scrolling. It's yeah. So give me a real book any day over something digital. But I appreciate your flexibility. I am interested in the Weird Time book. I read a review of it. I have not had a chance to read the book yet, but from the time I was a child, I was always interested in time travel, books, television. It seemed to be everywhere. And this this book, from what I read, appears to be I guess, a collection of time travel stories. Could you go into maybe some of the more famous ones, or some of the ones that you found the most interesting when you were putting the book together?
Yeah, well, and it's more than just a collection of time travel stories. I wanted to bring in because this book's really kind of an offshoot of an earlier book I wrote back in the early 2000s called Time Travel Fact Not Fiction. And, since that time, there has really been a surge of interest in the nature of time in physics. Before, when I was writing these earlier books, with the exception of maybe Einstein and his general theory of relativity, most other physicists were really afraid to approach the subject of time. It was almost like it was best left to philosophers to deal with it, rather than approaching it with the possibilities that there may be some scientific theory about the nature of time. And so I wanted to bring the mythologies of time, starting from the very beginnings of mankind. People who believed in deities and nature spirits and all these things, who may have controlled time, to the old like fairy stories of, say, like people who would be captured by the fairies and spend a night with them, dancing around the fire, only to go home to find that 50 years have passed in real time, but they still look the same. You see that somewhat in like the story of Rip Van Winkle, but there's hundreds and hundreds of other stories from all around the world that approaches it the same way. So yeah, it's each of the writers that I got together for this book contributed a chapter or several chapters on various subjects. Some of them dealt with the scientists right now who are looking at time and the nature of time, and whether or not there is the possibility of time travel. To one scientist, an anthropologist, who thinks that the UFO phenomena may represent time travelers. And then we go into time slips and missing time, and just all of these wonderful stories that Paul and I were talking about, that you would read in these great paperback books when we were kids, from Brian Steiger and John Keel. I mean, I can't do a book like this without having stories like that in it, because that's the real fascination about this, because scientists may be arguing back and forth whether or not time travel is even possible, and then you have these stories from people who say that they were walking down the street and suddenly found themselves in the 19th century for a short period of time, only to find themselves back back in their normal time. So that really is the, I don't want to say the total thesis of the book, because the book does go all over the place. We also include Bigfoot and cryptid creatures and ghosts and hauntings, and all of them have you can find connections with weird time stories. So it's a type of book that it's there's something for everybody in it. You pick it up, and you're going to find a number of stories and pieces in this book that are going to be of interest to you.
Do you happen to know? Sorry, Paul. You're muted. Do you happen to know, Tim, what the oldest recorded time traveling story is? I know the Time Machine has got to be pretty old. That's maybe the oldest one I can think of. Is there one before that?
Oh, well, when it comes to, like modern fiction, yeah, H.G. Wells is probably one of the first. There were some probably early, what we now call science fiction stories that were like novellas that kind of approached the subject of time, though it was more situations of like natural events where something would happen. But yeah, the H.G. Wells' The Time Machine would be probably the first book that actually involved the mechanical time machine that took somebody forward and backwards in time. And now that you ask me that, I really do need to go back to see if anybody actually wrote. Say like a short story, especially in the
1800s or earlier?
yeah, well, yeah, probably in the late 1800s, along those lines. But most of the stories that I ran across were more like um, romanticized types of fictional stories, ghost types of stories, things like that.
Somewhere in
A
time,
lot of
very
a lot
romantic.
of those. Yeah, well, yeah, you'd have. I know one that I ran across. I wish I could remember the name of it now. It was like where the guy of the manor house kept seeing
Woman.
the ghost, on the stairwell, and then eventually the two were able to meet together in each other's time, and then finally he like disappeared, and then he was like the ghost in her time. So it was kind of a bittersweet type of romanticized story.
And also too, if you're looking for like a super old time travel story, uh, there's a story in the Bible. I think it's called Joshua's Long Battle or something like that, where he was praying for more daylight, and God manipulated time, gave him some more daylight so he can have a victory. So if you're
Uh,
looking if you're looking for an old time travel story, that's one. And what's kind of unique is like Rendlesham Forest. Um, the one of the soldiers was touching a UFO that landed there, and he saw a binary code, and that
Okay.
binary code was saying that the occupants of that UFO were from the year, I believe, 8100. If I'm correct
How
about
old
that.
is how old is that story, Paul?
The Rendlesham
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Oh, didn't that happen, Tim? Didn't that happen in the 80s
Yeah,
sometime?
like 1981, I think, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, 1981.
I
Yeah.
think
Right,
the
but
binary
but
code thing kind of, yeah. Sorry, Tim. Go ahead.
well, no, but he didn't come out with that story until years later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the circumstances of why he said that he sat on it for so long, whether he had forgotten about it or what. But yeah, I mean, he claimed that he was downloaded when he touched this object, this binary code, and then I guess he sat down and wrote it out by hand, 010001, like,
Yeah.
but then somebody actually took the time to read that and get the message. And it also talked about various locations. It had several latitudes and longitudes in this message that there's still speculation on what exactly they mean. So I don't know.
Hey, Tim, I want to introduce you to Paranormal Soul Brother Zandine Smith. I know he has some things he wants to ask you. Zandine?
Definitely. Tim, I've been looking over your stuff and it's like you have like a myriad, everything is fascinating. But some of the stuff I really thought I wanted to ask you about was the giants returning to the Holy Land. And
Hmm.
also I saw how you talked about ultra dimensional beings, and I was interested in your humanoid stories. But I want to ask you, do you remember that story that was declassified about some interdimensional beings that visited, and they talked about the Lakas and the Tolas. They told us to think of time like that Indian a version of Talas and the Locas where you have 21 vibrations, 7 above, 7 in the middle, and 7 below. And they told them to think of that they weren't from a planet, they were from dimensions. I wonder if you remember that at all, because I saw in Time, uh, Time Travel Fact, Not Fiction. I was wondering, I didn't get to go through the whole thing. But, and then also I wanted to ask you about the Bigfoot and the security with the Men in Black.
um, I I don't remember offhand the story that you are referring to
Okay.
about the logo, but
Yeah,
however,
you're right. Yeah.
yeah, well, that is something that when you look at, say, various UFO stories, and I'll use that as an example, where say like a witness will actually have a face-to-face contact with these beings. They're often told that time as we think of it is not real, and
Okay.
that they were often told that the UFO beings, and of course, I mean, these stories just vary wildly across
Yeah.
the range from person to person, but they've often been told that these that they don't come from another planet as we're thinking of a physical planet, say like in a solar system out in space somewhere,
Oh, okay.
but
Okay.
but instead they are, for want of a better word, interdimensional travels,
Okay.
interreality
Okay.
travelers, and that even though that they come from a vast distance away, they're actually very close to us, which try
Ah,
to try to
oh, yeah, yeah. Wrap my
get
mind
that
around that.
wrap your mind around it. Right. But and that's one of the reasons that they say the explanation is that they've been here from the very beginning. It's not like they're
Ah,
coming
okay.
from,
Okay.
yeah, it's not like the ancient aliens type of hypothesis where they are coming here from other planets and only arrived at a certain time. No, they've always been here and they've always been interacting with us.
Yeah, that
Uh,
seems more accurate. I mean, yeah, that more than people are thinking. They're just with the technology they have, they probably would have been able to come here much long time. A long time ago, like you said, they've been here, huh? That makes more sense.
Well, yeah, and you would have to understand too that being an interreality traveler probably also is would be time travelers as well. I think that as time goes by and we have a better understanding of the nature of our reality and this universe, then you'll start finding that time and different realities, that there is not going to be a lot of difference. All right,
Hmm.
that possibly we could be what we would think would be, traveling into the past or the future is actually interactions with these alternate realities that exist parallel with our own. Some of them having a timeline that would be similar to ours, say from the past, or some from our
Yeah.
future. Some right along with us, barely, uh, 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 almost indistinguishable from our own timelines. And in fact, some of the research that I was doing in writing this book, some physicists are saying now that all of us, that our consciousness could actually be like surfing across these alternate realities on a second by second basis, and every
Oh,
decision that we make puts us onto different timelines. And since we're constantly living, constantly making decisions, we're constantly moving along these alternate timelines. That's just the true nature of reality. I'm not saying that that's true or not. That is some of the things that the newly emerging physics is discussing and willing to actually look at now.
Well, sounds like sliders and the butterfly effect put together.
Yeah, very much so. Except that uh, rather than sticking to say like one timeline, you're just constantly going across them. Think of all of these alternate realities as different. And I
Roads.
don't know if I don't know. Well, I don't know if you remember film strips. When
Yes.
you were a
Oh,
kid
yeah.
in school, they'd be okay. Think
Yeah, film strips.
yeah, take an infinite number of them, and rather than traveling the length of the film strips, you're going across them one by one
Okay.
on a
I see
on a
what you mean.
constant basis. And because
Wow.
of that, that gives you the illusion of time. And that's something that Eastern philosophers, the the UFO people, and even I'll say like channeled mediumship types of communications are all saying that our conception of time is wrong, that it's not traveling from the past to the present to the future, that it's something completely different, and we have to learn to get our minds out of this. The sun rises, the sun sets. That sort of physical aspects of time, and get a better understanding on how it actually works in our reality in this universe.
And Tim, with your book, one of my stories was a story I was very close to, and that dealt with my ex-brother-in-law, Captain
Mhm.
Crazy Jeff Bushell. And he had a boat called the Orion. Um, he was very known on St. Thomas. That's where he was living at. At St. Thomas, he was also to a mechanic on Morgan Freeman's boat. And it's rumored that the movie Captain Ron was based on him because he was a very obnoxious type sailor type guy. And one day he got into a big argument with my sister, which I didn't mention that in the article, but he went to an island by himself. He fell asleep on the beach and he awakened to some noise, and he saw people, these sailors dressed up in, I guess, 18th century type clothing, and they were loading these big crates onto the ship. And the ship looked like it was from the 18th century. And he was thinking, it must be like a movie they're making on this island. And he said, they always make a lot of movies on the Caribbean islands. And he just dozed off for a little bit. He awakened, and that ship was gone. There was no way that ship could disappear that fast. And all those people who were moving those crates on that ship vanished too. They were just gone. So as he thought about it later and he discussed it with me, I said, sounds like you had a time slip. You went back into time for a small period of time, saw what you saw, fell back to sleep, and then we're back in the present time. So, and there's a lot of cases like that, right, Tim?
Oh, sure. Oh, right. Well, and I mean, I didn't write about it in the book, but I mean, I had a very similar experience of my own. It didn't involve pirates, but it involved a flat tire, and in front of this old farmhouse, and an old guy who came out and helped us fix the flat tire by bringing us a piece of plywood to put under the jack. Because it kept slipping on the shoulder of the road, and later when my mom found out, she had me take them back, say like, I can't remember if it was a pie or a cake, it was something like that, to thank them for helping us. And I couldn't find the place. I knew exactly where it was, but there was no house there. I drove up and down the road and brought my friend, myself and a friend, went back and got my friend. And, he said, no, it was at this location. The only thing that we could find was that, I remember that the sidewalk that led from their front door to the highway, to their mailbox, was surrounded by teacup rose bushes, very low cut. And even though there wasn't a house there, there were these, there were still teacup rose bushes, but they were like way overgrown, like nobody had taken care of them through the years. That was the only thing that we could find that was close to looking like the place that we were. So I mean, I have no explanation for it. I've gone back and forth over the years. Was it a ghostly event? Was it a time slip? Maybe it was a kind of a combination of the two. Because that's we discussed that in the book back and forth quite a bit, that some of these like haunted houses or ghostly events could actually be a form of time slip. And if our audience doesn't quite know what a time slip is an event where somebody will either see or experience, or both, either a past or even a future event, albeit briefly, and then find themselves back in normal time. And I first ran across time slips in one of my original books that I wrote back in the 1990s, and since then, people have written me all these wonderful time slip stories that they've had, these personal experiences with that. They're not interested in getting any kind of publicity or anything like that. They don't want to make money, and they don't want most people to even know about it. They just want to know this sound, from the events that they read that I wrote about. They want to know, do you think I had something similar? I'm not crazy, am I? That's
No.
so many people. I feel so bad for some people sometimes, because they, we talk about this stuff all the time and are very familiar with it. All right. Most people, if they have an unusual event like this, it's just out of the blue and they have no reference to it. And it'll eat some people up for the rest of their lives, thinking that maybe they're nuts. Did I have a psychotic breakdown when this happened? And that's that's one of the great things when these people write to me or get a hold of me, is that I'm able to tell them, hey, I've heard a lot of people with very similar stories. So don't worry about it. You're probably not crazy. I can't go and officially say that you're not crazy. Stamp on their forehead. Yeah, stamp on their forehead.
But that's
Not crazy.
Tom, that's the thing. The point that you make about that, it's so impactful that even though you kept second guessing, like, was it this or that, you didn't second guess, did it happen? You knew something happened. It's different when you have those things that happen where you question it to, did that really happen? But you are on the level of, you knew something happened, but not exactly what. So, I mean, that's better than, those experiences where it gets so vague after you think about it. You're like, did it really happen?
Well, and and it's like I said, most people who have no experience, they haven't read about this stuff. They haven't seen it on
Right.
television. So it's just, it's just out of the blue for them. And they do question, did this really happen? Did I fall asleep? A lot of people think that maybe they fell
Logical
asleep.
explanation, yeah.
Yeah, and had a dream. It's like, oh, so you were driving in your car and you suddenly fell asleep and had this dream that this, UFO landed, and you saw these little guys get out and collect rocks
Yeah,
and sticks and stuff, and
Yeah, man.
then fly away. I was like,
Yeah, man.
no,
we were talking about time slips. And one of the things I want to ask Tim, over in London, England, they have a large amount of time slips by people on a street called Bold Street. And I'm pretty sure Weird Time discussed that because people actually go into his time slip and either they go into the 1950s or the 1960s. Tim, wasn't that in also too in Weird Time, or is that just my imagination?
Yeah, because this story has been, approached before. We didn't go into it quite as much as in earlier books, but yeah, the Bold Street time slips. There's been a number of different accounts that have come from that particular area. The main one was a policeman and his wife who were just enjoying the weekend, doing some shopping, and he was going to go into a bookstore there and suddenly found the scenery around him changing to what appeared to be possibly the late 1950s. He saw like a van drive by that was advertising a store that he knew at that time had long since closed, and the bookstore that he was going to go into was now named Cripps, which was the store that was located in that building years before, but it had been out of business for quite a long time. In the process, he was going inside, and there was he suddenly noticed a young woman who was dressed in modern clothes, which to him, I mean, stood out because everybody else was dressed in obviously 1950s clothes. And as they both stepped into the building, it then shifted before his eyes back into a bookstore. And he said to the woman, because she was kind of standing there looking a little dazed herself, he said, was this something else or something along those lines? And she said, I thought it was a clothing store. I was going to go in and look for clothes, and now I see it's a bookstore, and then turned and walked out. And he has tried to find this young woman to get her to collaborate on his story, but I don't know if he's ever been able to find her. But yeah, and then, the subsequent research showed that it used to be a store called Cripps, and I actually I think in Weird Time I have a photograph of how that building looked in around the time that this man thought that he saw this happening. There was also another story where this young man had shoplifted at a nearby building and was being chased down the street by the security guard. And he said that he fled into an alley with the security guard right on his heels. But he said that when he got into the alley, he suddenly noticed that it should have been an open alley, but now he found that it was a dead end and he was stuck. But when he did that, he noticed that the security guard had disappeared. And so when he walked out into the street, he saw that it looked to him to be possibly the 1960s. The street looked completely different. There was a store across the street that shouldn't have been there. I can't remember, what it was. I don't. Maybe it was like a bodega or something like that. But I mean, he just felt completely out of place. People were dressed differently. So he like turned around and went back into the alley because he was so, surprised by what had happened. And when he did so, the security guard suddenly then appeared in the opening of the alleyway, looking just as confused as he was. And the security guard was like, where the hell did you go to? you were gone, and now here you are.
Right, let
And
him go, huh?
yeah, well, and I think he did. I think they both were so messed up by this that the security guard was just like, "Forget about it," and walked away.
Yeah, yeah.
And I guess that this was kind of the event that made this kid kind of like shape up a little bit
Straight and narrow, huh?
yeah, start having a different outlook at life.
Oh
But
man.
yeah, there's been a number of stories, about this particular location, which is rather odd, because a lot of times time slips just seem to happen at locations without any rhyme or reason. But for some reason, the Bold Street time slips are all centered around this one particular area.
Wow,
That's
that's
amazing.
amazing. I bet you somebody will catch it like a glitch in a video game you're playing, the kids play, and they say, "Wow, how did I do that?" And then they do it a second time, but they keep doing it accidentally until they kind of maybe somebody will find those exact points or portals, and the exact triggers. That would be amazing, because we
Oh
sure
yeah.
can't. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that Brad Steiger wrote about in one of his books. That
Oh yeah.
he had a guy write to him one time and say that he had the ability to see these doorways, these openings,
Oh wow.
if he happened to come across them. And he told Brad that some of these locations that these doorways opened up to, and that you could, if you would go in
Great.
one, you could come back out at this particular location, while this doorway took you to another location. He said some
Wow.
of them seemed to be, because he never had the nerve to actually stick his head into them, but he said some of them had the appearance that they weren't going to take you to someplace on Earth. He said that he always had the feeling that because the doorways to him, they had a particular color that he said that he could perceive that showed him that they were earthbound, for want of a better word. But some of
Incredible.
these other ones, he was afraid that if he stepped into them, he might not step out into our world ever again. You know.
Yeah. And then Tim,
That's
also
incredible.
too, mentioned in your book is the case where I think it was a Cessna pilot, and he was flying his airplane from some Caribbean island to Florida, went into a swirling vortex at the
Mhm.
Bermuda Triangle, and got there, I think, a half hour early or something like that. Is that correct? Or
Right. And let me I can actually get up the pull up the files of my of the book here. Yeah, this let's see now.
yeah, that's an amazing story. And not only that, it's verified by the people on the ground, the air controllers. There was no explanation on how he could have traveled
Yeah,
so fast in a Cessna or whatever.
right. And this was a guy by the name of Bruce Gernon. And it actually it was him and his father. And this took place on December 4th, 1970. And they were and this did take place in basically the Bermuda Triangle area, and they were flying from the Bahamas, and they were going to go to Miami. And when they left, the sky was completely clear, no problems. But then again, if you've ever been, in the Caribbean, that things can happen very
Yes.
quickly, weather-wise. Uh, so they hadn't been in the air for very long when they said all of a sudden they noticed that the clouds were building up around them. And then suddenly he said that the clouds just completely enveloped the plane and formed like a swirling tunnel in front of them. Just imagine, say, like a tornado, and you were right in the middle of it, looking up. He said that's what it looked like, except that the clouds were swirling in a, and what was it? It was like a counterclockwise rotation, I think, and lightning was flashing back and forth, and the St. Elmo's fire was dancing across the wingtips and across the propellers.
Oh wow.
Their their instruments were going crazy.
Almost
The radar dropped out. The radio would not work. The compass was spinning, and I mean they thought that they had been been captured by like a really bad thunderstorm and were in the process of dying. Because they couldn't tell up for down at that point. They could. He said that they could have been flying upside down, so as far as I knew. Yeah, and they wouldn't know it. But then almost instantly they were out of it, and the clouds disappeared, and they retained radio communication again with the tower at Miami Beach,
Wow.
and they found that they were just off the shore of Florida. So they, what would have taken, and I can't remember what the exact details,
And Tim, didn't they
now.
have electronic fog or some kind of green mist or something like that?
Right. That was part of the whole electrical activity that was
Mhm.
going on in this tunnel. He referred to it as a electronic fog, but it seemed to be some kind of electrical activity. Yeah, he says that suddenly the fog started breaking apart in a weird sort of electronic fashion, because he said that at some point it looked like that there were vertical lines on these clouds of brilliant colors. Long horizontal lines appeared on the fog on either side of us. And he says, and the lines widened into slits about 4 or 5 miles long, and we saw blue sky through them, and the slits continued expanding and joined together, and within 8 seconds they all disappeared, and the gray fog and the green mist had disappeared. It said they ended up landing at Palm Beach, and that a flight that had taken less than 47 minutes. He said that they had never made it from Andros to Palm Beach in less than 75 minutes, yet somehow they had made it in 47 minutes.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah.
Tim, you know what?
Go ahead.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. I don't want to.
No.
I know we have run out of time. I want to ask you, um, about the Giants' return to the Holy Land.
Hmm.
I want to ask you. I didn't get to read all that, but was there a part? Is that meaning new Nephilim, like new mating between celestials and human women, or leftover, or somebody that's already been here never disappeared? Did it get into anything like that? I was wondering.
Well, this was, and you'll have to forgive me that this was one of our guest authors who wrote that story, and his name escapes me for the
Bill
moment.
Chanish? I know Chanish. Not Bill
I'm
Chanish,
so,
was
Bill Chalker?
it? Chanish.
No, okay, I know who you're
Okay.
talking about. Yeah, I
But
think it was, but yeah, unfortunately, like I said, it would take me another 5 minutes to open up my notes here
oh,
to
that's fine.
find
You
it.
have so much great stuff in the book. It's like I had so many questions, but the time travel got way fascinating.
No, I want to address that a little bit for you because this was all part of UFO activity that broke out in around Israel in the
Right, right.
in the late 70s and then
78,
early
79, the 80s.
1980s. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Haifa,
and
right around. Yeah.
hmm and people were having these fantastic experiences. Some of them being the having contact with beings who claim to have been from these craft, and a lot of
Wow.
times they were reported as giants, looking like giants, and
Wow. Okay. Okay. Okay.
very similar to the biblical descriptions of the Bible.
Okay.
Sometimes there weren't contacts, sometimes there were evidence of landed craft with giant footprints left behind, that sort of
Wow.
thing.
Fascinating.
So,
Okay.
so the author was actually speculating about whether or not there were similarities to the stories in the Bible about the giants and
Okay. Okay.
elephant, things like that, and this resurgence of UFO activity, which involved giants.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. Thank
Mhm.
you. Thank you. Well, so what about the lady who had the camera and she took pictures of interdimensional beings? She saw what equipment they used. That story you had, I didn't. That sounded fascinating. The lady with the camera, and I guess she took pictures, and the camera could see interdimensional beings and the equipment they were
Are
using.
you
I
talking
guess,
about you're talking about the chronovisor? The
yeah, that was
chronovisor
in the
over
2019 book, of
yeah,
Tim's.
it
Yeah.
happened in the Vatican. And
Okay.
there
Oh, I know who he's talking about there, and if this is the if this is the case that I'm thinking about, this is like a 1960s to 1970s type of story of a woman who developed these abilities to actually, and let me see if I can locate her name. See, this is one of the things that Tim Beckley was always so good about. Is people could throw him questions like this, and he would instantly remember the names of these
Oh
people.
yeah.
While me, I could remember this, the details of the stories, but a lot of times
Yeah.
the
So many
names of the
you
people escape me.
yeah. You probably heard
But
so many, like you have to hit the first three lines. You have to you be reminded, but it'll come back to you, I'm sure.
oh yeah, yeah, but yeah, this was a woman. I mean, she was just kind of I hate to say average housewife, but she was an average housewife that got an interest in photography. And when she started taking pictures, she noticed that there was stuff on the film that wasn't there when she took the original photographs, and she noticed that a lot of times that if there were shots of the sky, that there would be glowing disc-shaped objects in the sky.
Oh
So
wow.
she actually went as far as to get an old a movie film camera, like a Super 8 millimeter camera, and started deliberately trying to capture these things by just taking pictures of, say like the church or,
Oh, okay.
the street. And she was capturing these absolutely incredible things on her film. What was odd is that some of these things would actually, and if you're not familiar with like a film camera, it's got holes on either
I
one
saw that.
side or the other side, sprocket holes where the gears will actually pull the film past the gate to be able to be exposed. And this film a lot of times had objects appear around these sprocket holes, which shouldn't be
Wow. Okay.
possible.
Okay.
So somehow she was psychically probably impressing on
Okay.
this film these strange objects. Now, whether
Wow.
or not these things were actually there, whether or not it was just just her
Yeah. Yeah.
mind
Yeah. Yeah.
putting these op or kind of a combination of the two, because I think that there's a possibility that we're constantly surrounded by stuff like this that we can't see.
Wow.
Our eyes can't register a lot of these, these different
That's a good point.
light spectrums.
Wow.
And probably a
Okay.
good thing too, because we'd probably be, going crazy, seeing all the
Yeah,
stuff
man.
around us. But that sometimes with the right abilities and the right conditions, you can capture these things on film. There was another guy by the name of Ted Siros who lived in Chicago back in the 1960s, and he was known as the psychic photographer. And that's what he could do. He could concentrate on a camera and make things appear on the film that shouldn't be there. You know, the camera would be pointed at him, but he could get pictures of, say, like buildings in Italy, or the
Wow.
picture. There was a picture, I think, of like what appeared to be maybe an Indian a Sikh wearing a turban. You know, things like that. So, you know, and if you think about it, you know, uh, 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 you have there's that ability to warp, manipulate time and space, and able to in order to get these images on
Hmm.
film. And you know, I've wondered, and now you got me thinking about it. You know, whether or not, you know, people have been able to do the same thing with digital cameras. You know, I don't know if I have heard um, as many accounts of psychic photographers using digital cameras. So I wonder if maybe there is something about film and the ability to manipulate the images with your mind. You know, if there's some
Wow, yeah,
kind of,
that's
you know,
interesting.
special thing going on. I need to look into that. There we go, Paul. You know,
Oh yeah,
can
yeah.
digital cameras be manipulated like
Well,
the old film cameras
you
could?
know, it's funny because when we do our ghost hunting and we snap photos, we get those designer orbs, regular orbs, orbs of different
Yeah,
color. Where are those orbs
you can
coming
ask
from?
for them. Yeah.
Yeah, is it lint? Is it dust? Is it dewdrops? Is it light refractions? Skin flakes? What can it be? You know, or is it something really paranormal? So that's why, like when I do my ghost hunts, I try to look for intelligent movement, and I'll place my hand on the wall and I say, if you're listening to me, appear by my hand. If I get the orb at my hand, that shows intelligent movement. And one of our case examples, and I'll say it really fast, one of our investigations, and Zandine, you weren't at this one, but they had a spirit named Emily, and she would drain the energy from the occupants. So I said, Emily, if you're listening to me, I said, kiss him on the mouth. And three of us, we snap a photo and we get an orb on his mouth.
Mm.
And I said, wow, that's incredible. I said, okay, Emily, if you're listening to me again, sit on his lap. And then the orb is hovering over his lap. That showed intelligent movement. That was something that I could deem as paranormal. So,
Wow.
yeah, that was really crazy. And the story that you're talking about, Tim, also too in your book, Weird Time, which is out there on Amazon if you guys are listening, Weird Time, they're talking about the Vatican's chronovisor. And that's what I
Right.
thought you and Zandine were
Yeah,
talking.
yeah. Yeah, it could tie in perfectly. Yeah, the
Yeah, and
chronovisor.
yeah, the chronovisor, does it really exist? Or is it just some kind of fabrication
Well, what
told?
was that about? What was that story about the Byzantine monks came up with us? They were trying to make a hymn in the key of C sharp, and they, they discovered time travel in that way. They were able to look back at, you know, the Last Supper and things like that. Is would that anything to do with the chronovisor?
Well, the chronovisor was allegedly devised by a Benedictine monk from Italy by the name of Father Anetti,
Okay.
and he was an expert on Gregorian chants, among other things. He was also a mathematician, a published author, just a very
Wow.
smart
Yep.
guy. And it actually started back in the 1950s when he was visiting another monk in Rome, who had an oscilloscope. And they were researching recorded modern day recordings of Gregorian chants, uh, and were playing them and then looking to see how this would register on the oscilloscope. And they were having trouble with the reel-to-reel tape recorder, and the other monk who was helping him kind of exclaimed, in frustration, something along the lines of, "Oh, Dad, I wish you were here to help me." Talking to his deceased father.
Okay.
And later, when they played back this recording, there was a voice that came out of this monk's father, was long since dead, saying, "Of course I will help you. I am always here for you."
Whoa.
So this was probably one of the first mentioned recordings of EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon.
Right, right.
Well,
Wow.
this got Father Ernetti interested in, and wondering, first of all, could this be actually a communication from a deceased person, a ghost, spirit of the dead, what have you, or could it possibly be something else? And he wondered whether or not, because we know from Einstein that matter can't be created or destroyed,
Good.
that it can only,
Right.
it can only be changed. That if voices, experiences, day-to-day activities, if that light, that audio, that energy ever really dissipates, and if it could be captured somehow. So
And it
he
could
said,
go into, I'm sorry, Tim, and it
no, no,
could go
go ahead.
into the Akashic records.
Yes, yes, right, right. Well, and that could very well what be, the Akashic records are, because information is forever, you know, and so it has to be stored somewhere. Of course, our three-dimensional minds, picture like a giant library someplace, but the universe is filled with energy, and the universe is filled with information. So the Akashic records, under the right conditions, can be accessed in a myriad of different ways. So Ernetti actually got funding from the Vatican, and with the help of other scientists, and he never really would reveal exactly who. He mentioned Werner von Braun, which I always thought was kind of interesting because Werner von Braun was a rocket scientist,
Yeah.
not not really a like a physicist along the lines of what you would expect to build something like what they eventually ended up building. But he said that they were eventually able to build an electronic device that they could actually tune using radio frequencies. Uh, 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 they were able to tune into the past, and that they could hear and see past events
Warner
through
von Braun
a.
spoke on this. That
I'm
one
sorry.
Warner von Braun. Actually, Warner von Braun. He actually spoke on this as well. That's interesting.
No, Walter Ramon never spoke about this. That's
Oh,
just
oh,
it. This the Father Unetti.
okay, okay. Because
And
the
I
reason why I was gonna, yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
Oh no, no. The reason why I was gonna say, because when you said Warner von Braun, I was saying that was the guy who was talking about there was gonna be a false flag, alien invasion thing, and we didn't need the space force and all the stuff. I was thinking it might have tied in, but go ahead. I
No,
didn't.
yeah, see, that's just it. Nobody else, none of the other scientists have ever come forward. Of course, they were all, supposedly, sworn to secrecy, and
Ah, okay, yeah.
only Father Ernetti was the one who came out to talk about it,
If it
being the
wasn't
head
for
of
him,
the
we wouldn't know
project.
about it then, huh? If it wasn't for
Exactly.
Father Arnetti, we would. Yeah, okay.
Right, right.
Gentlemen, we're about at
We're
the
getting close.
3 4 minute mark. Any final questions and final thank you for being on, Tim?
Tim, tell us how we can get your book. Or
Oh, sure. Well, you can find Weird Time Exploring the Mysteries of Time and Space on Amazon.com, as well as some of your favorite local bookstores and library. Ask your library to carry a copy as well. Just look under, my name, Tim R. Swartz, or, under the title. It's available both as a print and an ebook. And if you want more information about it, you can visit its website, which is weirdtimebook.com. And of course, all of my other books you can find on Amazon as well. Just type in Tim R. Swartz, and they'll all come tumbling out for your reading pleasure.
Are you still on the radio? That's the radio show on Thursday nights, by the way.
I do a show with the late Gene, oh God, I don't, with Gene Steinberg called the Paracast.
Okay, I'll try to catch that. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, you can find it on most popular streaming platforms.
All right.
Thank you so much, Tim, for being on. You're a fabulous guest.
Tim
You
rocks.
gave us so much knowledge and information tonight. My mind's
Mind
blown.
blown. Mind
Yes.
blown.
Yeah, thank
Oh,
you,
yeah.
Tim. I had a lot more questions for you, but we just don't have the time. I could have kept you going, I think, for probably a couple hours, especially with the man-made or the attempted man-made time travel versus the natural phenomenon. But yeah, we seem to have run out of time.
Well, I'm always willing to come back if you're willing to have me.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Thank you
yeah.
very much.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.